Welcome back to Mindshift, the podcast where we explore the metals the world needs for a low-carbon future and what it takes to mine them more sustainably. So far, we've been looking at copper, green steel, lithium, nickel and cobalt, the materials that power the transition to renewables. But there's one metal that might not come to mind straight away: gold. It's not just for jewellery or investment. Gold plays a crucial role in our everyday lives, in smartphones, computers, cars and medical devices, thanks to its unbeatable conductivity and resistance to corrosion. That makes it essential to the digital world and increasingly to the energy transition. But like every metal, gold has to come from somewhere. And that raises important questions about how it's mined and what it'll take to meet growing demand in a responsible way. In this episode, I'm joined by Dr Stacy Hope, Women in Mining UK, and partner at ERM and Board of Trustees for the Impact Facility, and Erik Vlot, Tailings Specialist and Global Manager, Tailings and Backfill at Weir, to explore the realities and the future of gold, from its surprising uses to how the industry is changing and where consumers fit in. So let's get started. Stacey, Erik, thank you both so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having us.
Maybe let's start about setting the scene. I've already alluded to it slightly, but gold, I think, is often thought of in terms of jewellery or investment. But most of us are probably walking around with it in our pockets or have it in our homes. Where can we find gold being used? And is it perhaps in places that people often don't realise, Stacey?
Absolutely. And I think before we even talk about where can we find gold, it's important to understand why we use gold. So gold is an incredible material. It's non-corrosive, as you've mentioned, so it's very hard to rust. Actually, gold doesn't rust, which is incredible. It is a great conductor. It is malleable. It is resistant to heat, resistant to radiation. So it's used across a myriad of ways, whether it's in your smartphone or even in implants that are tiny, tiny implants that are embedded in our bodies. So I think understanding the myriad of uses is important, but also understanding where it came from or why we use it. So one of the things that I'm really fascinated by when it comes to gold is the use of gold in AI and in data centers, because it's so conductive and it produces very little emissions. It is so good to have gold used in these various ways. And there are a number of other ways, especially in space exploration, but I'm sure Erik has loads of other examples.
So if you look in the medical industry, there is gold in a lot of things. And one of the things that people might not know is that in every crossflow device, so where you have these tests for whether you had COVID or not, there is a little bit of gold in there. So in the medical industry, gold is widely used. You see gold is used in the industry of space as reflector. So in all of these areas, gold is important.
And how crucial is it going to be in terms of the energy transition or digital transformation? What role does gold have to play in that, Stacey?
Yeah, I think we've mentioned how what a great conductor of energy it is, and the fact that it's it's resistant. So in solar panels, we have very thin layers of gold to help with the absorption of sunlight, but also with the conductivity of the energy. So how do we transfer that energy faster, more efficient? So solar panels, it's one of the best examples, but then you also have wind turbines and future clean tech energies, because it is so efficient, and so versatile. Gold can be seen in every single part of the energy transition.
And Erik, you mentioned a place, the COVID tests, where I wasn't aware that gold was. I'm sure many of our listeners weren't. How aware is the general public about gold's use and potential for the energy transition as well, as you were saying, Stacey? And are people paying attention to where their gold comes from or its wider significance? Stacey, let me start with you.
So the World Gold Council did a survey in 2019 where it found that 70% of those surveyed were interested or saw value in ethically sourced gold. So when asked, consumers are saying, yes, we're interested in ethically and responsibly sourced gold. But are they really aware what that means? And are they even asking before being asked about where their gold comes from? And I think that's the disconnect. So we have intention, but then how does that intention translate into connectivity with the wider audience? So if I asked about 10 people on my way here today if they could give me examples as to where gold can be found. Everyone said jewelry. No one said pregnancy tests or COVID tests. No one thought of space exploration. No one thought of the energy transition. I think that disconnect between information around gold, it's the silent, transformative element of the world, and the communities, it's so far between. So it's really understanding how do we translate our very small industry's knowledge to the wider audience.
Erik, do you think enough is being done around communicating that message then?
I think we don't know where gold is coming from if we have our phone or if we have our laptop or if we use whatever device we want. So I don't think we know even where gold's coming from. And we forget that gold is very, very important. So everybody wants to have a phone, but everybody doesn't want to spend too much money on the phone. So if you would start to think about how do I responsibly source my gold and look at the whole supply chain and look at how it's mined and how we basically do our work around gold, you might see that the value of gold might be increasing. But that is then the other side of the balance when you really want to think about sustainable mined and produced gold.
Well, let's talk a bit more about that. Perhaps you could give us, Erik, a snapshot of how gold is being mined today, from exploration through to refining. What does that life cycle look like and how's it evolved?
So in basis, gold is dug up. So gold is not grown. You cannot grow gold, at least not at the moment. So you have to start mining it, and you do that either by underground mining, where you start digging up holes and you try to get out the rock, and only a very, very small percentage is actually the valuable gold which you find in that rock. Or you have surface mining, where you start digging up surface areas and you start to win the gold. So first of all, you need to crush all these rocks down to small size. So I mean in the sizes of microns you're actually talking, and then you can get the gold out of the ore, and you can do that chemical, or you can do this by a way of gravity, because gold is very heavy.
And you said that there's only a small amount of gold in
Yes.
the ore. So what happens to everything else?
So you get a little bit out. So that's basically the valuable, and all the rest is waste. So sometimes you see that if you basically have 0.5% gold, 99.5% is just waste, and that's what we call tailings. So the tailings is there with gold, and you have to make sure that you manage your tailings in a sustainable way as well. And that is even a bigger challenge than sometimes getting the gold out of the ore. So ore is very valuable, but only there in very small quantities inside that ore.
So what are the sort of challenges that we face with tailings then? And are there any opportunities with tailings? Can't we just put them back in where they came from?
So yeah, the ideal situation would be that you take all those tailings and you put them back in that basically hole which you dug from. But yeah, of course you need to have ongoing mining, so it's not that easy. So underground mining sometimes gives you the opportunity to bring your tailings back underground, but in general you actually have to store your tailings above ground, and you need to make sure that it's safe and risk-free. And that is the biggest challenge at the moment, because people sometimes forget, but the tailings that you put above ground is a legacy item. And I mean that it is there for perpetuity. And that's what people sometimes forget. So in the past, you stored tailings with a lot of water because it was easy to transport. Nowadays, you want to think about that in a more safe way, in a risk-free way. So we do not leave this to our next generations, but we make sure that we actually give them a risk-free environment.
And is that happening?
It is happening more and more. So there is much more attention for that in the industry, with the community. So we actually work together with communities to think about solutions, look at things more holistically, get water management involved, look at water usage, look at energy usage, look at ground usage, look at biodiversity, all of that. So these aspects are now much more important than they were a few decades ago.
Are there any opportunities that come with those tailings?
Yes, there are certainly opportunities where you want to look at what can you do to reuse part of the tailings. So, for example, if you need to build dikes around the construction for tailings, you used to get external material in and you brought that there. Now there is a drive to look at, can we use the tailings itself as a construction material? So you actually minimize the impact it has on the overall resource usage. Secondly, you also try to look at possibilities of using the tailings locally to do something for the community. So maybe you can use it for road construction, you can use it for bricks, you can use it for sand construction. So it all depends on various factors, but there is much more focus on there at the moment.
And Stacey, looking at gold demand historically and now, how's that shifting? What's driving demand today? And are we starting to see any future risks or changes in trajectory?
So gold has always been in high demand ever since, well, I can't date back that long, but we saw the rise of empires through gold, China being one of them, where the Chinese and other Asian empires or civilizations use gold as their main monetary source. The same in Latin America. So gold has always been at the top of the list when it came to commodities that were tangible and material. But we're seeing gold have even greater precedence in the current climate, especially when we look at geopolitical tensions and economic uncertainty. So gold has always had a stable place in economies. We tend to hedge our bets against gold. So as especially the US dollar is shifting in its power, gold will always stay as that stable commodity for traders and for economies. So you're seeing a lot more private investors and central banks buying into gold more and more. But the more we see geopolitical tensions, geopolitical uncertainties, the more that demand will grow. But shifting away from geopolitics and looking at consumer demand, that's also going to drive the way in which we look at gold. So we're seeing the more precedence placed on gold as a part of the energy transition, as we spoke about earlier, and with EV batteries, right? So we use gold in fuel cells there, and we're going to hear the word efficiency used more and more with gold. I don't think we've ever used efficiency when we think of gold. We think of glitter, right? And all that glitter is in gold, but in this case, gold is king, and it will be king for times to come. So I don't envision us seeing a shift in demand to that extent anytime soon. I think as we're growing as an economy, as we innovate more, we'll see gold play even more significance in innovation in human civilization.
I'd love to talk about some of the key challenges that the sector still has to confront. Gold sometimes is in the news for negative reasons, maybe environmental damage or working conditions or conflict gold. What would you say are the key challenges the sector still has to confront or is perhaps already confronting?
Yes, I think when we speak of gold, we have to talk about gold in two separate ecosystems. So we have large scale mining, and Erik was talking about tailings and waste from potentially a large scale mining perspective. But oftentimes, when we turn on the TV, we're seeing mining from a community level. So we're being exposed more and more to artisanal and small scale miners, or we call them ASMs for short. Now, in recent times, we've seen this media coverage more and more through cobalt. So we're seeing a lot of focus on DRC and the cobalt value chain.
The Democratic Republic
The
of Congo.
Democratic Republic of Congo. Sorry, we get so used to using acronyms. But gold has been where this emphasis has been placed for a very long time. So artisanal and small-scale gold mining has a number of significant challenges. We have communities that follow and understand the gold markets. They're very sophisticated in when they go and mine gold versus when they focus on agricultural commodities. So when gold is high, you see higher demand for gold production. So artisanal and small-scale gold miners will go out and they'll use very simple tools that are easy to move, which is why we hear a lot around mercury and mercury contamination and cyanide contamination. These are two chemicals that are used in the amalgamation process of gold. And because they're so easy to carry, and I've seen them carry them in little vials, you can put it in your backpack and you can go out to mine. This is seen as a good tool by artisanal small-scale miners to extract gold quickly. But it's a very hazardous tool to do that. It presents significant environmental damages, but also health risks. And it's a story that I tell very rarely, but I lived in the Amazon for a couple of years, and I used to work in an indigenous shop. And you would have artisanal and small-scale miners come to the shop to trade gold for food. And in order to trade the gold, as a shopkeeper, you had to burn the gold. Now, when you burn the gold, it's highly toxic, and that presents significant health risks. I was 20 at the time, so I didn't know the health implications, but there's no usage of protective wear, no masks, you're just burning the gold. So these risks to people, to environment, the ways in which you have to use lots of water in order to extract the ore, presents so many different risks that we're still trying to address. We are addressing them, but whether it's at a pace that's fast enough and that's sustainable, that's another question.
Well, is it?
Well, then,
Let me answer your own question now, Stacey.
I'd say we're not, because we're not investing enough in the artisanal small-scale mining industry. So for countries around the world, artisanal small-scale miners are sometimes the major producer of gold. They represent 20% of the global gold supply. About 15 to 20 million people mine gold artisanally and as small-scale miners. That's not touching on other metals. So 15 to 20 million people mining gold with very little access to capital in order to invest in clean technologies and safe tools. So that presents significant risks. At an academic level, we're seeing changes and we're seeing thought leadership put out there. But to your earlier question around communication, are they reaching everyone? Are they reaching the next generation of consumers? Are they reaching the next generation of potential miners and artisanal small-scale miners? Not really. You have certain initiatives such as pact Fairmind, the Impact Facility, that are looking at ways in which to bring artisanal small-scale miners into the formal supply chain. So that's by addressing human rights risks, child labor, trafficking of persons, and environmental challenges as well. But in particular, health and safety risks, which we often don't talk about, but which are some of the greatest challenges and risks when it comes to artisanal and small-scale miners, those risks to people themselves. So we have a number of initiatives, not enough investment in them. So that would be my, yes, we're doing stuff, but we're not doing enough stuff because we don't have enough investment in them.
Erik, I'll come to you in just a moment to ask about challenges from your perspective as well. But just to quickly pick up on that, Stacey, where you said we are doing some things but not necessarily enough. Do you have any examples of better partnership or responsible practice that can stand out as a kind of beacon of light?
Absolutely. There are a number. So the Impact Facility works with other mining companies and small-scale miners in particular, where investment can flow to safeguard the mining supply chain in the region. So we're doing a lot of work with gold in Ghana, Tanzania, and Kenya. We've done some work in Guyana, which is where I'm from. 70% of Guyana's population of miners are artisanal small-scale miners, particularly in gold and diamonds. So it's a very important commodity for me as well. So we're investing in programs where artisanal small-scale miners can borrow protective gear, where we build tailing dams to ensure that we're not damaging the environment and having corrosive materials enter into the water table, and education around what responsible mining looks like to communities that have not really been engaged in this narrative is quite key. So you have the Impact Facility and Pact and Fairmind doing quite a bit of work with communities in order to bring them on board and bring them along the journey.
And are you seeing a beneficial impact from that?
Oh, yes. So we have more children in schools, for example. We have greater economic beneficiation to communities. So communities are seeing greater development and greater access to capital for diversification. So not because we're mining gold means that we only want to mine gold. There are other sectors that need investment. So communities are able to take the profits from their operations into and invest into other activities and other services as well.
Erik, let me pick up again on challenges from your perspective. Are there other challenges that you see? We've spoken a little bit about tailings. I don't know if you want to elaborate on those challenges, or if there are other challenges in the way gold is extracted and processed, and if so, what are the biggest changes that are happening in the way that's addressed, and what's making a difference?
Yeah, so it's really interesting to hear about, the stories around artisanal and small scale mining, and then you look at, okay, how do you work on the large mines? So I think in general, if you look at development costs, if you look at how much money flows into developing a new solution, a new methodology, taking something, for example, like bioengineering, where you can look at bacteria that might be eating the chemicals out of your tailings and create a more sustainable environment, or whether you want to do it for stability, or you want to create a process where with chemicals you are extracting the gold from the ore in a more environmental friendly way. All of those cost quite substantial amount of money, and indeed usually only the larger players in the world can actually invest that kind of money. And then I think it might be the challenge, how do you make that available to the smaller communities? How do you make knowledge that you gain in the wider business, how do you make that available to the smaller communities? So there is a lot of development around there, but indeed the challenge is, how do you look at the most promising developments and how do you bring that one forward. So in general, we know how to handle to think about gold and to say, okay, how can we already use less energy and water in the whole crushing of the ore to make the big rocks small? How can we already do that? How can we think about creating the waste streams that are more sustainable? That is all there, but still you are searching for those like golden nuggets in there that actually bring and give you a leap forward, and that's what the big miners are still doing.
Sounds like you're advocating for a more holistic approach then.
Yes, so that is certainly one of the things that I think we should be looking at. So rather than only focusing on certain aspects of the industry, we should actually be looking at a holistic approach. If we talk about digging out the gold ore and then bringing all of it back, so look at it full circle, how do you do this in the most sustainable way? So looking at the crushing, looking at how to recover the valuable, looking at water usage, looking at energy usage, looking at footprint, but also looking at the impact on the social environment, at the biodiversity, looking at all of these aspects. I think that that's important. And I think we should also look at existing tailings. So there is something which we have not talked about, but there is so much existing tailings facilities also in gold, where in the early days, and I'm talking about 100 years back, we didn't even know how to really process that ore. And there is still a lot of valuable material now in those tailings facility that we could actually start digging back up again and reprocess it, and sometimes even de-risking existing facilities while bringing then the tailings to a different facility and even back to the abandoned mines, which we talked about at the beginning.
It sounds like the innovation is really exciting, in fact, from both of the things that you've been talking about.
Absolutely. And just reflecting on what Erik has said, thinking about some of the innovation that we're seeing from the artisanal and small scale mining side, where the World Bank had initiated a challenge to innovators to address the mercury issue in particular, but other challenges that artisanal and small scale miners, particularly in gold, faced. So you had innovation around bioengineering and how do we use bioengineering to address mercury pollution and cyanide pollution, to how do we ensure that we can monitor legitimate artisanal small scale miners and small scale and artisanal miners that are participating in more dubious activities that are linked to smuggling, war, and terrorism. So many different initiatives and investments, but particularly partnerships in order to address the challenges, look at it holistically, bringing all aspects of gold mining into the conversation and making a more sustainable approach to addressing them.
Let's talk about another key stakeholder then, consumers. What role do consumers have in driving change? What kind of choices practically or behaviours could genuinely influence how gold is being sourced and produced? Stacey, and then I'll come to you, Erik.
Yeah, so at the beginning we talked about that consumer awareness and to what extent are they knowledgeable enough in order to ask the right questions, to be good advocates, and to participate in this very discussion that we're having today. One good example that I like to use in terms of how we can engage consumers is by connecting with them. I shared with many of my friends the documentary by the World Gold Council with Idris Elba, right? Idris Elba, he's going to attract a lot of people from different generations.
Very well-known actor.
A very well-known actor. And especially here in London, British, but by way of Ghana and Sierra Leone, I believe. Sorry, Idris, if I got that wrong. But those two cultures are very important to the gold supply chain and gold value chain, ceremonially, ancestrally, and economically. And whether the consumers, the Gen Zs of the world or Gen Zs of the world, have actually seen this video is left to be seen itself, because we're not able to reach them through the right channels. But consumer behavior is key. So we need consumers to be asking the right questions. We need consumers to first ask, where does our goal come from? And understand when they receive that response, what that actually means. So what does that mean in terms of fair sourcing? What does it mean when we hear the responsible gold mining principles? What does that all mean when we hear the good delivery list that comes from the London Bullion Market Association? I'm trying not to use acronyms, or otherwise known as the LBMA. What does this all mean? Because we have a number of standards and measures that ensure that we really can get to a more responsible supply chain. And whether we're asking our producers if they are considering fair mine, fair trade, ethically sourced gold or not is another challenge that we need to pose to consumers. Some are asking, but not enough.
Erik, do you think consumers could be doing more? What could they be doing, do you think?
Yeah, so what I think is, I absolutely agree with Stacy on all these aspects. And I think it is very difficult to challenge consumers. I think one of the key things would be that if consumers realize that there's gold in so much day-to-day usage, I think that that's the first step. People don't realize that what they are doing with their day-to-day machines and everything, what they do, that there is precious metals in there and also gold, and that they, by not asking the questions, they actually just go about and they are not investigating enough. They don't understand what the mining industry means to that whole thing. So I think that that's probably one of the things that I would basically support: awareness. And secondly, I would also say, because of that, if you have stuff that you want to throw away, don't throw it in the bin, but bring it back to recycle, because there is so much value in there. We didn't even talk about that because as a miner, probably I wouldn't normally think about that, but this is why it's so important that you take your old stuff and bring it back and don't just throw it in the bin, because there is so much residual value in all of the stuff that you have. So those are probably the two things that I would say.
Yeah, it's a great point. We haven't even talked about e-waste, but
Yes.
it's a growing market in emerging economies where the recovery of not just copper, but gold is a driving incentive for a lot of communities.
Yeah.
So I think it's a really, really interesting point. And when we're teaching children in primary schools about gold as a commodity, when we're teaching them about geography and geology, it's definitely missed opportunities in which we can grow that awareness early on. To your point, Erik.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What really strikes me speaking with you both today is how clearly passionate you both are about the opportunities for more sustainable mining, looking at tailings and the opportunities that lie there, and protecting our future generations, and enhancing communities as well. What drives that passion for you both, Erik?
For me, that actually, I'm an engineer by trade, so I love big machines. So and through the big machines, I actually came into the industry of mining and of tailings, where I could really see how those machines could make a difference, and I became passionate about that. So I love to be at sites, to put my boots on, to put my gear on, and talk to people at site about how to implement new solutions and how to make a little bit of a difference one step at a time. So this doesn't happen by just one person. This can only happen by us, all of us working together, and I just get so much energy from that. So that's what's driving me.
Stacey?
So you have an anthropologist here. So the people factor will always be a driver. But I am from a major gold producing country. I'm from Guyana, where artisanal small-scale gold mining and junior gold miners are key. If you're familiar with Guyana in today's world, you're probably thinking oil and gas, but traditionally it's been gold. But my PhD fieldwork was in an indigenous community where you had a number of gold mining operations from major mining companies as well as artisanal gold miners coming to this one particular village in which I lived. So I could see the role and impact that it had on the day-to-day lives of the communities and how important it was not just to their existence, but to their future. So you had women who were participating in gold mining as service providers, whether they were cooks, whether they were the ones who were weighing the gold, or whether they themselves were gold miners in these indigenous communities. And I found it quite fascinating that my first exposure to mining came from mostly women and artisanal and male artisanal small scale miners, but it was mostly the women who I had access to. So that led to a much larger piece of work that then stemmed into my career with the UN and the World Bank, where it was really focused on how do we bring these communities into a wider discussion around responsible sourcing, responsible economies, and sustainable economies at that in emerging jurisdictions. So it's a academic and personal passion that drives my love for gold and definitely my love for this conversation.
And we've talked about innovation and also, Erik, you mentioned the opportunity to make a difference, which you've been talking about as well, Stacey. What kind of talents do we need to be attracting to the industry to enhance and drive that forward? It looks like, a broad range of different opportunities and an exciting place to be.
Absolutely. We've talked about geopolitics. We've talked about innovation in tailings. We've talked about understanding what responsible sourcing and sustainability really means. So the industry needs to first grow its talent pool. We are seeing a shift away from mining, which is problematic because we do need more people interested in the industry, whether it's gold or any other metal, because we need those transferable skills. But we need more conscious miners. We need, and I think to Erik's point around that holistic approach to mining, we need CEOs and board members to take that holistic approach to how do we address productivity, demand, and growth vis-a-vis a social and environmental lens. And we're seeing that growing. We're seeing more major companies buy into responsible sourcing, responsible mining, but also working with communities in order to have a much wider value chain and supply chain when it comes to gold.
Are you seeing lots of young talent coming into the industry, Erik? Would you like to see more?
Yeah, I would like to see more. So I think a lot of people see still the mining industry as a little bit, like dirty and messy, and I don't want to work in the mining. I think one of the key things is, we all need mining because we all want to walk around with a nice smartphone, and we all want to have a laptop and an iPad or whatever. So I would like to see a lot more young people in there. And if you really look at the progression that mining has to look at the technical side of things, we get more digitalization in there. So machines, processes which are self-supporting, where you will see that there is a shift away from the traditional old school mining going down underground or above ground. All of the machines are remotely operated, so you need a lot of young talent to go into that next step of the development. How do you control your machinery? How do you control your processes? There is that thing. There is also the thing that you want to see, okay, how can we then optimize it, possibly through the use of AI? So there is a lot of new developments going in there, where you might see traditionally that people who think mining is dusty and I don't want to be there, you actually go towards an industry which is high tech and which will give you the opportunity to really contribute something to the stuff that you actually use day to day. And that connection I think if the young people make that would be absolutely great.
As we bring this podcast to a close, just two questions, looking for sort of quite short answers, really, just to finish with those messages. Stacy, if we could scale up, and Erik, I'll ask you as well, just one thing across the gold supply chain to improve sustainability or impact, what would it be?
Traceability. Because traceability hits every single aspect of what we've been speaking about, especially when we consider responsible mining, whether we're talking about recyclability of gold and trusting where the gold comes from in order to recycle it, or whether we're talking about responsible sourcing for electric vehicles or the energy transition as a whole.
Erik, how about you? One thing.
So yeah, I think I concur to what Stacy is saying. Traceability is important. I think from my perspective, in my background, I would say stability. Meaning, with tailings, no more risk, no more legacy, no more risks into perpetuity. I want to have stability. So in one word, stability.
What excites you most, both of you, about the future of gold? That could be in terms of technology, partnerships, mindset shift, or anything else. Erik, and then we'll finish with you, Stacy.
So for me, I think what I really am thrilled about is that you see that nowadays you start talking about more and more about partnerships, and it's not like the traditional way that you basically focus on one piece. I really see that now you can talk to multiple companies, and you try to take a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and you try to work with communities towards a new solution. And especially that interdimensional stuff where you start working with people, I really think that's exciting, that you achieve much more than we did traditionally. So that is what I like most about it.
Stacy, what excites you? How hopeful are you for the future?
I'm quite hopeful. If we look at the history of gold, it's defined human existence for quite some time. So I'm looking forward to seeing how it evolves and the latest technological advancement that's being driven by gold. And of course, the people factor. But who knew Erik was an anthropologist as well?
Well, there we've learned something new. Well, that does bring us to the end of today's conversation. Stacy Hope and Erik Vlot, thank you both for being here with us to share your insights.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you, Sam.
And thank you to you all for tuning in. Next time on Mindshift, we'll be reflecting on everything we've explored so far and more in our final episode, The Circle, Scale Up and Clean Up. We'll dive into how the mining industry can rise to the challenge of delivering more metals more sustainably, and how technology, partnerships and fresh thinking will help us get there. It's all about powering the net zero transition whilst aiming for zero harm. We hope you'll join us for this important and encouraging conversation. Until then, goodbye.